teachers, what was the best smart but response from a student you have heard? There was this awesome history teacher I had freshman year of high school who was just always in an amazing mood. We'll call him Mr. Smith. One day everyone is sitting in class waiting for the tardy bell to ring when a kid sneaks a condom onto the door handle. The bell rings and Mr. Smith walks into the room, grabs the handle to close the door, and pulls the condom off of it. Looks at the condom helmet for a split second and stuffs it into his pocket while saying thanks. I'll need this later. In high school one of my teachers was having a disagreement with a student. I can't remember what it was about but finally the teacher asked him if she wanted her to call his mother. The student replies, "Do it then. My mama will agree with me too." The teacher then asks him to leave her class. He goes, "You know what, I'm gonna call my mom for you." He then whips out his cell phone and calls his mom on speaker. "Hey, ma, this teacher want to talk to you." The whole class just lost it. My buddies and I used to like to play ultimate frisbee on the football field during lunch. We were told not to. Organized sports were supposed to be that. Organized. They didn't want kids getting hurt without supervision. Anyway, one day we said screw it and decided to do it anyway. So they turned the sprinklers on us. Didn't stop us. We kept playing and finally they sent a security guard out to get us. Detention for the rest of the day in the cold cafeteria. Soaked and cold so we started chattering and talking. But it's hard to stay quiet when you're shivering. Anyway, the coach watching over detention told everyone to shut up. You'll sound like a bunch of canaries in a cage. Everyone got silent. Then one person started it. And it slowly grew. Cheap. Cheap. Cheap 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 cheap. Moo. Bah. Yeehaw. Yeehaw. The coach couldn't help but start laughing. Then turned the air even colder. Bastard. I've taught preschool for years, and one of my favorite dad responses to children who are being whiny just to whine is the "Hi, I'm your teacher. Egg, I'm thirsty. Hi, thirsty. I'm your teacher." Anyway, one day, after a long week, I sat down to lunch with my class, preschool, remember 4-5-year-olds, and say to a child, we'll call him Tommy, "Boy, Tommy, I'm really tired today." Without skipping a beat, he swallows his mac and cheese, looks me right in the eyes and says, "Hi, really tired. I'm Tommy." That was the day I knew I had taught him all I could. I'm a preschool teacher too, and for some reason that age group getting humor is the funniest thing ever. We have a student who has English as a second language, and one day as he was eating his lunch he announced to the group, "I'm really liking this smashed potato cube," and sitting next to him snorting mashed potato out of his nose. Not a teacher, but this happened in an upper level French class where you can only speak French. If you speak English, the teacher scolds you in French. My friend walked in a few minutes late for a quiz and wasn't allowed to take it. My friend looked at the teacher and said, "In English, that's bulls." The teacher looked back angrily and said, "Also in English, what did you just say, my friend?" "En français, monsieur." He got kicked out of the class. In French class we had one guy say to his friend, "Oh, you bastard," right as the teacher walked in front of them and the whole class got quiet. We thought they were in for it. Instead, she goes, "En français, say batted." In middle school, in history class, this happened. Girl, "Hey Mr. C, how do you spell word IDR?" "Mr. C, DICTIONRY." She writes it down, stares at it for a moment trying to comprehend why it doesn't look right, gets P at teacher. Class is dying. Teacher laughing as well. I always wondered how you're supposed to look up, in a book, a word you don't know how to spell. Like, sure, you've probably got the first letter, so you know roughly which section it's in, but after that it could be basically anywhere as far as you know. Not me, but a colleague told me this story. It was one of his first years teaching, so he was about 22-24 at the time. It was a junior high science class and he told a student to stop messing around and get back to work. The student's response, "Man, I got to be older than you. All I'm looking at right now is a B younger than me. Back to work." My sister, who is a teacher, was taking her kindergarten class through the lunch line. Well, this day was St. Patrick Day, so there was green cupcakes. My sister told the class, jokingly, "Don't eat too many cupcakes, or you'll turn green." A young black boy looks up at her and says, "Miss Carey, I ain't never seen a green brother before." Till brothers don't get jealous. In biology during high school, the teacher was teaching us about food chains. In a very the house that Jack built manner, he got to cats eat mice. But what eats cats? Although he was referring to fleas, I, being Chinese, immediately said Chinese people. The class burst out in laughter, but then I had to stand up and apologize to all the Chinese people. In men's choir in college, we were singing The Little Drummer Boy. The director stopped our singing and explained something to us. He got distracted and went off on a tangent for about 5-7 minutes. Then he pulled himself back around but couldn't remember where he had stopped. He asked himself out loud, now where were we? Someone in the basses said I think we were on The whole choir just lost it. Not a teacher. My English teacher in high school was going on about how she thought that learning another language was good for creativity and thinking outside the box. She asked the class what language they thought was best. You got the standard French, Italian, etc. Finally the smartest just blurts out Newspeak would be double plus good. Teacher absolutely lost it. I was showing Cosmos in a break between classes and one kid seemed particularly enthralled by the tardigrade, so his Witty's friend goes, "Small minds are amused by small things." The kid retorted, "Why do you think I hang out with you?" The whole class went bananas and even I went over and high-fived that kid. It was a great class. The victim was laughing as hard as anyone. I miss those kids. That was a kid who could deal it out and take it. I had a friend who got into an argument with their teacher about the whole I before E except after C thing, and if it sounds like an A it's EI. My friend told his teacher that wasn't always true, so she got defensive and started going off about her lit degree and how she knows more than him. His response was, "No, seriously, there are some weird words where that rule doesn't apply." She kept saying that it wasn't true and he kept saying the same thing over and over. "There are some weird words where that doesn't apply." He did this like 5 times and finally she snapped and yelled, "Like what? He just yells weird." She permanently kicked him out of her class for being a smart butt. Well, that's a pretty weird reason to kick someone out. Not a teacher, but I had a real see you next Tuesday of a chemistry teacher. I was only a few steps away from the classroom entrance when the bell rang. She asked why I was late. Told her the bell rang before I got here. Since then, I never received above a C on any of my work. Even in group labs, I personally would receive a letter grade lower than my lab mates. English teacher here. I told a rowdy student to pipe down and work on her social studies test. It was a study hall. She said she would if I allowed her one meaningless act of rebellion. I asked her what, and she immediately burst out laughing and said, "Can I put tape on your arm?" So she put a single piece of scotch tape on my arm and then happily worked on her test for the next 40 minutes. Kids will never stop mystifying me. I once promised a kid that I would arm wrestle him if he finished whatever it was he was working on. He happily worked on it for half an hour, then came to claim his prize. Sometimes the littlest things work. Peasy won. He was 11. In my defense, he was a massive Samoan kid and I am a short white girl. We had a teacher that would always threaten to phone our home if we were misbehaving, which he promptly stopped after. Teacher, what would your mother say if I called home right now? Student, she would say hello. My math teacher said, "If you don't understand, ask me. There are no stupid questions." Where a guy in my class quickly responded, "Is that so? Do you cut your toenails with a chainsaw?" Not a teacher, but in class when I was younger, a kid was causing trouble and the teacher got after him. The kid was complaining about the desks and the teacher asked, "Should we just get rid of them all and sit in here Indian style?" The kid responded, "You mean with a 6-pack on the cub?" He got kicked out. Oldest meanest English teacher at my school was going over adjectives and modifiers all day. Super boring. Reject student gets up to use bathroom and is told to get a hall pass. He then says something like, "I hate these dang hall passes." Teacher is P and respond angrily with, "What did you say?" And the kid responds with, "Dang hall passes." Dang modifies hall passes. Mic drop and he's gone. I'm not a teacher, but this is a story about my teacher's response to one particular smart butt answer. So my high school mythology teacher, Mr. D, would have his honors class students help him grade tests from the other classes. He would always require properly spelled write-in answers. No multiple choice for him. So we'd get the tests, he'd read off the answers, and we'd mark them accordingly. One of his questions was who was the wife of King Minos. Now according to our Greek law, Pasiphae, Minos' wife, was the one who had fricked a bull and gave birth to the Minotaur. So Mr. D tells us that the answer is Pasiphae, and one of the students kinda timidly raises his hand. Mr. D goes, what you got? They wrote bull S. The class breaks into laughter. Mr. D grins and thinks about it a second. I like it. Half credit. That's why he was everyone's favorite teacher. Good sense of humor. And the fact that the answerer knew that Minos' wife was the one who birthed the Minotaur meant that at least some of the mental connections were there. So they got credit. A great guy. Mr. D for Dionysus. Like most Spanish classes, all the students had Mexican versions of their names. Robert equals Roberto. Kyle was sleeping in class one day when the teacher tried to wake him by calling him by his Mexican name, Carlos. After saying Carlos multiple times without getting him to wake up, she got impatient and yelled Kyle, so Kyle wakes up and says, "Mi llamo es Carlos." "Mi llamo es Carlos" equals I call myself is Carlos. This happened to my best friend in his French high school physics class. One day the teacher was in a grouchy mood and couldn't get the control of his classroom. People talking, laughing, generally not paying attention. He was never good at controlling his class, but I guess this day he'd had enough. He goes off on a rant yelling and screaming about how he deserves respect and how they need to listen. Mind you, all of this is in French. He then goes to say that they should be polite because he is being polite. Now polite in French is poli, pronounced poli. So the teacher in his raging rant says, "Moi, Jesus poli," translating to me, I am polite. At this point the class goes silent for a moment, after my friend blurts out in English, "How you're doing, Paulie?" At that point the tension was broken amongst the student, and laughter filled the room. The teacher wasn't impressed. Kid has his head down at the back of science class every day. Never does any work, but we all know he's quite smart. Teacher calls him out for it one day and says, "Why do you sleep so much at the back of the class? Do you think you're smarter than everyone? Do you think you know everything in the book?" He raises his head wearily and says, "I've done all the work at home, just leave me alone." All of Witty? Really? Yes. If you can answer a few questions on the book you can sleep for the rest of the term. Okay. If you can't, then you'll sit right at the front and not put your head down once. Okay. He then began to answer every question the teacher could throw at him. She even pulled up stuff we weren't ever going to study in the back of the book, and he just answered every question flawlessly. By the end of this 3-minute exchange he asked, "We done?" The teacher was speechless, so he said thanks and put his head down again. It was sick. This is more well-timed than smart, but once in middle school this kid next to me was looking and acting like he was sick and asked to be excused from class. The teacher asked why. The kid was about to respond, but then immediately threw up all over his desk and onto the floor. After a bit of coughing, he looked up and muttered, "That's why." Our teacher was teaching us about the states of matter, solid, liquid and gas. He was talking about how a solid you can break into littler pieces, but how you can't do the same to liquids or gases. So I blurt out, "But you can break wind." I still talk to that teacher and he says that was the best part of his teaching career. This was in 6th grade. That is gold right there. I'm a diving coach and I have 4 divers I'm responsible for, so I don't usually get swimmers' contact info. We were on our way to a meet and one of the swimmers was not on the bus. I said, "Who has?" Redacted. S number? No one. So obviously I got mad. "This is your teammate and not one of you girls has her phone number to text her." So one of my divers chimed in. "Why don't you, coach?" I said. "I have 4 divers. I don't need another 30 high school girls' numbers in my phone." She replied, "Ha ha ha, you wish." Easily the best burn of my coaching career. "Damn it, Becky," I said, "I don't need another 30 high school girls' numbers in my phone. The 30 I have on rotation already is enough." Our football coach taught economics at our second-rate high school in South Texas. When the material was too boring for him, he would often do some kind of Trivial Pursuit flashcards. One time he pulled a card from the deck that asked, What city has 0% population growth? The smart butt in the class quickly raised his hand and other students were baffled as usual, so he called on the smart butt. With a quick reply, the smart butt said, "The Vatican, of course. Because little boys can't get pregnant." In grade 8 we were learning some kinda tough math and the teacher wanted to challenge us and give us something just out of our skill range. Only problem was he needed to give us a mini lesson so we would be pointed in the right direction and do it ourselves. It was close to the end of the day, so we're all acting up and being loud as the teacher says, "If you don't pay attention you won't be able to do this question." "Sure you can," shouts one of the genius kids. "Then come up here and do it," planning on having the genius embarrass himself with this clearly advanced math for a 13-year-old. He hops up, grabs the chalk, starts working on the problem, narrating every step, drop the chalk and says, "Then just solve it." Normally the teacher was stunned, likely because it was the right answer. I have always wondered if this was some kind of fluke or as Lucas really was that smart. My aunt is a kindergarten teacher. She saw a kid carrying another kid on his back. She told them to not do that because they wouldn't grow. Then the kid on top asked her, "And who did you carry?" Dot. My aunt is 1.54 meters tall. In religious studies. Teacher, Ganesh is the remover of obstacles. I have a little statue of him in my house. Me. Is he in your bathroom? Teacher, why would he be? Me. Ganesh is the remover of obstacles. Right? That teacher laughed for 10 minutes straight. Mandatory. I'm not a teacher, but here goes. In choir one day, a male class clown was sitting with the soprano section before class. Teacher comes in and starts class without noticing him. He had long hair, but still hard to imagine. Anyway, 20 minutes and she realizes it and laughs a bit. She asks him if he's been there the whole time and that he must look like a girl to fit in so well. Without missing a beat he replied, "I guess I am what I eat." The class and teacher lost it. Many years later, they would come to learn that long-haired Franklin really did eat girls. He was arrested and sentenced to death for his heinous crimes against nature, and the people present in that classroom would all recall this event and think, "We should have known. We should have known." For context, this was at a Catholic school, and the teacher, a very stern fire and brimstone nun, and the student, an extremely liberal Anglican, had been at each other's nerves all year. After correcting the teacher on something she had gotten wrong, the nun said something along the lines of, "I hope you learn to enjoy the heat because it's going to be very hot when you end up in the deepest level of heck," and entirely unruffled, without a moment's hesitation she responded, "Actually, according to Dante's Inferno the deepest level of heck is made of ice, but don't worry, I'll bring a jacket." Dante's Inferno isn't exactly biblical canon, though. High school Spanish. We had the absolute shittiest teacher ever. It was done over cameras and she simultaneously taught 3 classes. Everyone, including the class monitor, hated her. Anyway, about halfway through the year enters Eddie. Now Eddie's mom moved from our little backwards town years ago to pursue modeling in Spain, and has now returned with her son who was born and raised in Spain. People loved Eddie. Very bright, funny and had a very open European personality. Of course Eddie knew Spanish better than his English, which was atrocious, and he kinda sounded like Arnold Schwarzenegger after a stroke. But I assume Spanish class is pretty equivalent to English class. No one talks like this, and written spoken English are 2 different beasts. After a test which he bombed, he got in an argument over the mic, which was a classic. It said like this, and no, the proper way is this. After a few minutes you could tell he had had it. He pushed the button on mic to speak and literally said, "Botch, look, I'm from fricking Spain," and left the entire student population and her slack-jawed and speechless. I went to a Catholic high school. One day in religion class, a girl asked if dogs went to heaven. Our teacher said number. The girl said, "But it happened in some movie." I can't remember what movie she said. The teacher said, "You can't believe what you see in movies." A guy in the back of the class jumped in and said Passion of Christ was a movie. My grandmother was a librarian for a school in Flint. There was one teacher she didn't get along with who was subbing for a class. When the teacher was taking attendance, she called upon a kid called Sylvester, and she pronounced it Sylvester. He corrected her and said it was pronounced Slyvester. She asked, "What idiot named you that?" and the kid replied, "My dad's Sylvester Sr." One second grader to another. Jimmy, if you turn out the lights in the bathroom and say Bloody Mary 3 times she'll appear. Becky, a Bloody Mary's a drink, stupid. They start so young. One of my questions on a quiz I made was use one of the following vocabulary words in a sentence. Student responds abdicate is one of our vocab words this unit. I had to give him full credit. Did this to a teacher in middle school. I wrote, I do not know the meaning of insert word here. She gave me full marks. I was a student in the class, not the teacher. The class was anatomy and physiology, and we were studying human reproduction. Our teacher was discussing how measuring your basal body temperature to determine ovulation. She recommended that women take their temperature at bedtime, just as your head hits the pillow. One of the seniors piped up, wouldn't that ruin the mood? Our teacher had to go out in the hall. She was laughing so hard. I live in a Latin American country, so the name Jesus is really common. So one day while in music class, a mate from another class comes to give some kind of announcement. None of us are paying attention while he is trying to talk, so the teacher angrily shouts, everyone listen to Jesus, to which a friend replied, listen to his word. Hallelujah. One of my buddies in high school gym class was jumping back and forth between the bleachers, which pee off the gym teacher. The gym teacher scolded him and asked, how would you like it if I came to your house and jumped all over your couches, in which my buddy replied, I would be kind of creeped out if you came into my house. The whole class loved it. This is a story about me. Back in the day, we were discussing in class what our term papers were going to be on. We go around the classroom saying our subject. It falls on me. Me. Space exploration. Teacher. Well, space is very big. Me. That's accurate. There were lots of laughs and I still feel bad about this occurrence today. I cringe at the thought of it and don't know if my teacher took it jokingly or if I seemed like a huge douchebag. Ms. McPhillips. If you're reading this, I meant it jokingly. By space exploration I meant like Mars missions, and this mishap in the classroom was only several years ago. She's not dead. If you are new to the channel, you can subscribe. I publish new videos every day. Until then, check another video. Bye for now.